Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. We have a wonderful show tonight. I get to talk to a good friend and, quite frankly, somebody who inspired me to action, Tiffany, the co-founder of Revolt against Plutocracy, and also someone that most of you have gotten to know under the former Bernie or Bust pledge back during the primaries. For me, as Real Progressives was just getting started and just ramping up, we looked over there and we saw Victor out there leading the charge, leading people to take a very militant position, stay in the line, stay in the course, not deviating, not wimping out, not violating the progressive code of Bernie or Bust. And for me, that rally cry was something I really held on to for dear life because I knew that nothing was going to change whatsoever if we didn't hold to our priorities and hold to our goals and who we are as people. If we just fell back into the fold and went along to go along and so forth, that we would be miserable failures. And as you saw, many people did try to fold back into the establishment, fold back into going back to sleep. And, quite frankly, I think that you see the fruits of that. You've got Donald Trump now. Instead of fighting tooth and nail for the lone progressive that was running, we have Donald Trump. Congratulations, establishment folks. You sold us out. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on my friend and fellow revolutionary, Mr. Victor Tiffany. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Great, Steve. Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
No problem, man. So before we get into the subject matter that I know you're really wanting to discuss tonight, I wanted to take a minute to talk about your pathway as an activist and as somebody who's really carried a lot on your shoulders as a soloist and as a husband. It's been pretty tough on you personally, has it not?
It was very tough. It was almost like being separated from my wife, and she certainly felt it. There was an awful lot of tension in the household because I was putting in from May or so of 2015 until the general election last year. I was putting in anywhere from 40 to 50 hours a week on top of my job. And so my wife accused me more than once of being addicted to my computer.
Yeah, that's welcome to the world. I feel that every single day, and worse yet, you're burning the candle at both ends. And for me, I think the worst part of it is that when I try to go to sleep finally at night. Now it's gotten better since some of the more inspirational opportunities to fight kind of passed back during the primaries, but I couldn't turn my mind off. I couldn't shut down. It just kept going. I'd wake up in the morning ready to go, and I'd go all day long. And
yeah, I was sleeping about 5 hours a night. My wife would go to bed and wake up alone. I'd go to bed after she was asleep. I never had a problem falling asleep. I'm very good falling asleep, but I'd be up at 5 a.m. and no reason to just lie there. I'd get up and start plugging away at various aspects of this. Initially, there was an awful lot of planning. We had the website to get set up. We had the Twitter account to get set up. And by the way, just a little story. All of this is going to be laid out in great detail. If I can do a little bit of self-promotion, there is a book that's been submitted to a publisher called Bernie or Bust, Pioneers of Electoral Revolt. But how we came up with Bernie or Bust, initially, we called this the Wins Pledge. Right in November, Sanders, the Wins Pledge that came from a friend of ours online, another revolutionary, who used to be, like yourself, a fairly conservative Republican. And the more she looked into what was going on in this country, the more she shifted further and further to the left. And that's how I got to know her through a Facebook group. So she suggested the Wins Pledge, and we're using that. And then I set up a Twitter account, and I couldn't think of a good name for the Twitter account. We started out with just my email address, my Gmail address, which wasn't particularly useful. And I kept asking Revolt Against Plutocracy co-founder Patrick Walker, what's a good name for our Twitter account? And made a couple suggestions, and they were both taken. And then late one morning, he comes back with, "Hey, I just saw this comment on a Facebook post. Try Bernie or bust," which very early July in 2015, shockingly, it was available. So it was less than a week after that, just a couple of days, when he and I both realized, holy mackerel, this phrase is a marketing gemstone. So we ditched the wins pledge, we turned it into the Bernie or bust pledge, and the rest is history that the establishment Democrats would like to forget.
Amen, man. So, all right. So I'm going to take us back here just for grins and giggles to the primaries, because that really was where the glory days happened. I mean, you guys were militant, man. I mean, you guys had some people out there that were like stormtroopers running roughshod, telling people flat out, Bernie or friggin' bust, sign the damn pledge, get on board. You guys were taking no prisoners, man. That was
awesome. We borrowed a lot from our own supporters. Someone wrote a comment on our Facebook page that I tweeted many, many times. Either follow Bernie's light or you'll be running from Trump's fire. And here we are running from Trump's fire. But it was one of many great lines that our supporters came up with. And it was great. We were ignored by the media almost completely. We had a Twitter media campaign. I was writing at the time for Examiner. It's a pro-am, or was a pro-am website. So I was the progressive Examiner, and I was actually wearing two hats. I would take off my activist hat, put on my reporter's hat, and I would report on what we were doing as if I were standing outside looking in and reporting on it. And at 10,000 pledges, I wrote a story that Revolt against Plutocracy had obtained 10,000 pledges, and we used that. Several of our volunteers would tweet that out to various people in the media, ABC hosts and reporters, NBC, CNN. We did it again at 25,000. I believe we did it again around 40,000, but at 50,000, the Washington Times picked up the story, ran a story about Revolt against Plutocracy and the Bernie or Bust pledge without providing a link to our website, but the traffic just soared to our website that night for the next day because she did use the phrase Revolt against Plutocracy and Bernie or Bust, and people could search it. So we had a lot of traffic coming in from search engines over that 48-hour period. And at that point, we got solicited by Fox News. They wanted to interview us, and also by CNN. And at that point, we hadn't found our spokesperson yet. I didn't really want to be that person. I wanted to stay behind the scenes, the organizer, the person working sort of in the background. But we hadn't found anybody willing to be our spokesperson at that point. So I went on Fox, spoke with Neo Cafuto for 3 minutes and 30 seconds, something like that. Very difficult to convey why Hillary was so unacceptable in that short period of time. But referencing the trade agreements that she once called the gold standard, there's an aspect to those agreements that are nothing shy of corporate fascism. And I referred to her and Trump as two various types of fascists, and I think CNN must have caught wind of this, because all of a sudden I was uninvited to show up on Carol Costello's morning show and talk to them. So I assume they just didn't want anyone that critical of Hillary Clinton on the Clinton News Network.
It's priceless. So I remember going out there at the DNC, and we had our people out there following you around.
I found a couple of you got interviewed. Yeah,
absolutely. But it was just so impressive. I mean, you're a firebrand, but yet at the same time you're a pretty level guy. And to look at you sometimes, you don't realize how much fire is in there because you're so calm. Your demeanor is always very calm, and you just seem calm, cool, and collected. But you are really a firebrand, and it was really impressive to watch how you were just sort of, we're gonna have a media thing here, and we're gonna do a interview there, and I'll be live on this over here, and and I'll be doing that over there. I was just like, who is this guy? He's awesome, man. It was, I sat there and I was like, I want to be Victor for, you know, and then I realized you were going nuts too, though, because what I didn't see, and this is kind of why I think it's important that folks understand this. This is a labor of passion for you. You want to change the world, even if we all don't agree on all the aspects of the way that change looks. The point is that you're putting your entirety into this, and you're sacrificing an awful lot. And I just want to say I respect you for that, first of all. And second of all, I do want to tell you that I really was very, very impressed with the level of effort and the amount of organizing you were able to do, pulling in that the Go Green 619, and some of the other things that you did after the DNC. I mean, Victor, you've never stopped. You just kept going, and it's a great personal, sacrifice, quite frankly, that you've done that. So I want to thank you on behalf of my own children for working hard as well. Thank you.
I do appreciate that, Steve. There's just to speak to one of your points. On the day that Bernie got on that stage in New Hampshire and endorsed Hillary Clinton, of course, people were really upset. His supporters were in pieces, and for me, it was just another day in this revolution. Oh, all right. Well, then it's going to be or bust. It wasn't. You know, he wasn't taking that fight at that point to Philadelphia as he had previously said he was, and I just took it in stride. All right. Well, then it's going to be or bust, and we're going to do everything we can to get Jill Stein as high in the polls as we possibly can. I just want to speak briefly about the whole concept of Bernie or bust. We didn't know going into this the kind of strategy we had on our hands. It wasn't until shortly before we launched the website, Patrick Walker again had emailed me, and he says, I see this write-in campaign as a lever we can use to extract concessions from the nominee if it turns out to be Hillary or anyone else. And it hit me, it dawned on me, lever. This write-in effort, this general election write-in strategy is actually a primary campaign strategy. It's leverage. Basically, we kept telling the Democrats over and over again, we tried various tactics, but ultimately it was the same thing as the billboard we ran in Philadelphia. Nominate Sanders or lose in November. And that leverage is what we're clinging on to. That's when this is our innovation. We didn't even set out to use leverage, but Patrick and I sort of discovered, hey, this is actually a primary campaign. Now, you couldn't do it in a minor party because if it's not one minor party candidate, there's a rebellion among the Greens and no, it has to be this other guy. It's not going to be a big deal. But in a major party, that's where you can actually deploy leverage successfully. So when it comes to the debate between Dem enter and Dem exit and Dem enter and Dem exit, we're both, right? Instead of having parties use us to achieve the ends of the neoliberal establishment, we're doing it the other way around. We're using the party to our ends. So right now we're Dem exit. All the Revolt Against Plutocracy committee members are registered with the Green Party. But we'll go back and we'll register with the Democratic Party if there is a worthy progressive running in 2020.
Very good. I appreciate this is not even pragmatism. Quite frankly, it's a big old giant sword that's sharpened on both sides. And you screw with me over here, I'll lop your head off. You screw me over here, I'll chop your legs off. There is no haven for the raven. You're going for broke. And I appreciate that.
It's interesting that you use a violent metaphor to describe this, because if you think about revolution, if you think about peaceful revolution, I mean, what do we have available to us? We have a potential leader. We had one in Bernie Sanders, and we might have one in Tulsi Gabbard or someone else who might step forward, a worthy progressive worth supporting as a Democrat. But what else do we have? The corporate and the plutocrats will always outspend us, right? So we have the internet, but so do they. What else do we have as a nonviolent tool? We have leverage. We're basically going to tell, and the Republicans could do this too. We actually encourage Rand Paul supporters to do a Rand or bust movement leverage type of thing, hoping that that would work to counterbalance what we were doing, knowingly doing on the left, which is intentionally dividing the Democratic Party to basically assert our will on it, to tell them, look, it's going to be Bernie Sanders, or you're just not going to win this election because we're not going to support another candidate. And it could have been O'Malley, it could have been anyone. It didn't matter. It wasn't never Hillary. All right, it's important to understand. There's a lot of people who were never Hillary, and of course the superdelegates ignored them. They ignored Bernie or bust. They went ahead with their establishment candidate anyway, and we were right. They lost in November. But I should add something that is outlined in the book. Democrats didn't lose because of Bernie or bust. We've done the numbers targeting specifically or narrowing it down to Pennsylvania. The difference in votes between what Hillary got and what Trump got is greater than the number of write-in votes Bernie Sanders got and the number of votes, the number of increased votes Jill Stein got from between 2012 and 2016, because we can't take credit for every vote Jill Stein got. She was getting votes in 2012. The most we could possibly take credit for, and even that's probably an exaggeration, was the difference, the increase of support she got between 2012 and 2016. And if you add that increase to the number of write-in votes in Pennsylvania, she would have lost. Trump would have beaten her anyway. And so the question is why? And of course, we go into a lot of, or I go into a lot of that reasoning and thinking as you know, what it was that caused Hillary Clinton to lose or Donald Trump to win. But at the time, throughout the general election, when we were basically saying, look, it's going to be Jill Stein or bust, and then we turned it into Jill Stein or doom, because on one hand, you had Hillary Clinton. Caitlin Johnstone points this out still. Hillary Clinton wanted to or was going to start a war with Russia over Syria. On one hand, you had a candidate who wanted to start a war with a nuclear power. And then you had Donald Trump, who doesn't really care much about the climate. And that's really my focus these days is doing what we can to preserve the climate until hopefully a progressive gets into the executive branch and can actually do what's needed to transform the energy sector from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources.
So, you know, I think we're heading into part 2 of this, which is where you're headed, I believe. And, you know, one of the things that I think we both share a love for is the environment. But we are coming at this from decidedly different vantage points. Talk to us a little bit about what your new strategy is and what you're going for. And how this all plays out. And more importantly, take us back a few steps to what inspired you, how you came to this this new strategy.
I don't remember, quite frankly. Logic, all right? You start with a couple of facts. Fact number 1, Trump is a climate change denier. Most Republicans are climate change deniers. Republicans are in power in the House, the Senate, and the executive branch. So they're not going to do anything about climate change. We can count on that fact in the next 4 years. Nothing's going to be happening from the federal government to address climate change. And the other fact is climate change is happening and it's accelerating. This isn't just some long cycle of solar shifts or, you know, distance from the sun or anything like that. Anthropogenic climate change is happening and it's accelerating, and nothing's going to get done about it in the next 4 years. Now we use logic. Therefore, if we're going to preserve the climate as it more or less is, it's up to us. We're not getting help from anyone else in the federal government. We might be able to get blue states to act, resurface road with solar panels and build wind farms and things like that. But broadly speaking, if we're going to preserve the climate, it's up to us to conserve energy as much as we can. And there's so many different ways that can be done. I talk about revolutionary consumption, which is basically going back to an age of frugality. Before the corporation basically in front of televisions, more or less, all our lives we've been programmed by corporations to want more, to buy this while it's on sale, to shop until you drop. All right, so Americans largely are programmed by corporate advertising to buy, and that's what drives the economy. The economy slows down because people get laid off, they can't afford stuff, and then if you can't sell stuff, you stop making it, and then you have to lay people off, and it turns into a downward spiral. So consumption fuels the economy. That's just a basic demand side fact of economics. This strategy of cutting consumption, and particularly energy consumption, reducing our carbon footprint, has two purposes. One, to preserve the climate, right? If you can't cut back on your consumption, then you're not really concerned about coastal cities around the world that are going to be underwater probably by century's end, if not mid-century, if we don't get this thing turned around in rapid order. And the other point, doing the same thing, if we slow the economy down, if enough people actually get behind this as a movement, bigger than Bernie or Bust, because not everyone was behind Bernie or Bust. There were Sanders supporters who didn't support Bernie or Bust. But there's a lot of people, progressives, radicals, liberals, moderates, who oppose Donald Trump and don't want to see him elected again. Trump wants to what? Make America great again. Well, we're not going to get any greater in military power. We're already the largest military power on earth. So if that has any meaning, it means the economy is going to pick up and accelerate. And what this will do is actually prevent the economy from accelerating. So it's a twofold strategy. One, to preserve the climate until somebody can get into power and actually do things, pass policies, pass spending plans that will convert fossil fuels to sustainable. And two, Trump, if people are looking at an economy that just isn't moving very fast, in fact, it's slowing down, it's slowly slowing down, he's less likely to get elected. So there's several aspects of this. I want to break it down into homeowners and non-homeowners, renters. And then with the renters, I want to talk about poor renters who are basically already living hand to mouth, right? They can't afford to buy stuff that they want, right? All they're able to afford is what they need. And then there's the other renters who can afford to do a lot of stuff. And finally, there's the long-term considerations, because what we don't want to do is inadvertently drive the economy into the ditch, because that'll harm a lot of Americans, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to just keep the economy from growing, but we don't want to shrink it too much either, because we don't want to find ourselves into a downward spiral. So let me talk about homeowners. Joseph Schumpeter is an economist who talked about creative destruction, right? So people who used to make sails for merchant ships went out of business when merchant ships started using steam engines, right? That's creative destruction. You create the steam engine, you destroy the sail industry. And then the steam engine people went out of business or changed their businesses when the internal combustion engine was developed. Again, creative destruction. So what we need from homeowners, and this will help keep the economy from completely going downhill and help sustain the environment. If homeowners can do special insulation projects to preserve, keep their heating costs low, or install solar systems on their roofs or rooftop windmills. They have screw-shaped windmills that are fairly compact, not these big circular things, but they just spin like a screw. and they rotate around with the wind, and they can fit on a rooftop, or thermal systems. So there's a lot of ways homeowners, particularly ones that aren't in the city, can spend money. All right, this is sort of the opposite of what I'm arguing for, is that we stop spending. I'm saying people need to stop spending on what they want and focus on what we need. And in the case of homeowners, we need to displace fossil fuel sources and replace them with sustainable energy sources. And since it's not going to come from the federal government, homeowners are in the best position to do things. We are on the verge this summer of ripping the walls, the outside surfaces of our house off, and putting a layer of insulation all the way around the house as one step in this direction. And then we're in a good sunny area, so we may do some solar systems after that. So that's homeowners. They have a special role because some of them have this money and they can use it to save on fossil fuels and actually start the transition or accelerate the transition to sustainable energy sources. Renters are, as I said, in two different categories. If you're poor and you're just only spending money on what you need, like food, for example, is something you need. Nobody eats used food. It's kind of a gross concept if you think about it. However, let me talk about food for a second. I was on Richard Moser's Facebook page, just happened to look at it. He had a meme or a post on top of his page who talked about meat eaters, people who eat meat very slightly, vegetarians, and vegans. Meat eaters have the highest carbon footprint. People who eat just a little bit of meat have a lower carbon footprint. Vegetarians have a lower carbon footprint, and vegans have even a lower carbon footprint. So we've been trying to cut back on the amount of meat we put into our chili. We have veggie burgers these days. We don't even use turkey anymore. So we are in the process of cutting back on our meat. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and tell everyone they should be a vegetarian because I don't think I've got it in me, but we are cutting back on our meat. So then there's renters who actually have more money, who do go out and buy clothing, they go out and buy furniture, they go out and buy things, new cars. So let's say you have a car and it's a gas guzzler, and you think, yeah, I'm going to cut back on my energy consumption, I'm going to go out and buy a new Prius. Wrong idea, because when you buy something new, that's actually increasing your carbon footprint. It takes a lot of carbon production, particularly the way they're built with robots today. That's all energy intensive. So if you want to buy a car that has lower or higher fuel standards, buy a used car. Right? Don't go out and buy a new car until you have to. And then if you can, buy a used car that's got higher mileage. And then go with, don't buy a new car until you just can't find a high mileage used car. And we'll know this strategy is working in a year or two when there's a glut of new cars for sale that they can't sell, and high mileage used cars are hard to find. That will be an indication that people are actually doing this. People are actually cutting back on their consumption, and really a focus on not buying new things. So if you need a shirt, you wear white shirts to work, you need a shirt because they're stained, they're ripped, go to Salvation Army and buy used white shirts. My wife shops there all the time. I get a whole slew of perfectly fine looking white shirts that she gets used.
They always sing that song, I'm gonna pop some tags, got $20 in my pocket, because I'm always shopping at the thrift store.
Sure.
I take $50 and I go on a Wednesday at this one place, Volunteers of America, and at that time they sell 10 items for $10. I will buy 50 items, and that'll be for my kids when they come visit. That'll be for myself. That'll be my work clothes, etc. Everything. This shirt I'm wearing, thrift store. I even get my shoes from the thrift store. I get Clark's. I got Timberlands. I've got friggin' Bass. I've got every kind of shoe that you would ever want. And I don't buy the ones that are obviously with the built-in hole at the bottom. They're nice. They're high-quality, good shoes that somebody just didn't wear, they didn't fit, whatever. I completely agree with that, sir.
So there's a time, there may come a time when you need something new. Let's say you have a flashlight and the batteries are dead, right? You need a flashlight because if the power goes out in your house, you need to be able to see. But if your batteries are dead, you can't, it's not going to do any good to go out and buy used batteries because they're dead too. So some consumption of new items is just necessary. But that's what we need to do in our minds, is start thinking, what do I need versus what do I want? And if you want something, just wait. Wait until further down the line when it'll come in handy. And I'll give you two examples when it might be handy to start spending a lot of money. So I already said we don't want, and this is the fourth stage of this understanding, which is keeping our eye on the GDP. What we don't want is to start a recession. All right, we're not Republicans. We don't want to drive the economy into a ditch. So if you get a GDP report for the first quarter of the year and it's in decline, that's good news. You keep it up. You get more people to do this, and fewer and fewer people are buying new stuff. The second quarter of the year is also in decline. Now we need to start spending some money. Right? This is an example where we want to actually bring the economy into some mild growth again. So in the third quarter, there's growth. And when you see that third report that says, oh, we're not going into a recession, there's been growth in this quarter, then go back into frugality. Then start saving the money. Don't spend it again. Again, we want to just keep the economy on a very even, slow keel, because that's how you keep America mediocre. That sounds like a strange strategy. And when I use the phrase revolutionary strategy, I mean, someone might point to me and say, no, that's reactionary consumption, because this is the way it used to be in the 19th century. People saved money. That's true, but they didn't coordinate in a movement to specifically undermine the executive branch of government. That's what makes this a revolutionary strategy.
Let me bring something up here, because obviously I've got some ideas here, and I'm going to try and limit them because I want to make sure that you can get your idea out.
There's 1,000 ways to do this.
Well, one of the concerns I have, and I don't know if you're familiar with this organization, but there's an organization that literally has drool coming down its chin right now as it hears our broadcast, and it's the Pete Peterson Foundation. These are the same buffoonists that put the debt clock up, and they have all the websites for Fix the Debt and all the other stuff. And these are the very people, the right-wingers, that are hoping that we do something dumb or something that in any way, shape, or form minimizes our living standard. And then they come in, and what they do is they basically put policies in place to make the living standard that we've declined to the new norm. And this is something they're desperate for, because even in recessions, there are winners. Everybody doesn't lose in a recession. So they're happy to see a recession, because that resets the table yet again. And if you look, people like you and I, the regular 99%, we still have not recovered from the last recession. So as we start talking about these aspects of how to approach this, just be very wary that we have a huge trade imbalance. Most of the stuff that we do in this country is done abroad, which is fine as long as our government spends. Our government doesn't spend, so therefore we end up with this leakage, is where the tub starts losing water and the recessions start coming. Take, for example, the Clinton balanced budget. The Clintons were the ones that destroyed the economy, yet the fairy tale goes by the Democrats that it was all W, putting wars on some credit card that never existed, and so forth. So I'm very concerned, because I live in a world of economics, so I don't really care about Republican or Democrat. I just look at the numbers and I look how it plays out. And there's a lot of really, really not so swift people out there still saying we are in debt to China. We're broke. We gotta worry about these debts and deficits. And well, Bill Clinton was really good. He reduced the deficit. Obama was good. He reduced the deficit. And what you've got is a situation where these people have been self-congratulatory, patting themselves on the back, while they literally wrecked the country, literally destroyed the nation, but they still believe themselves to be good. And so my concern here is that as we talk about revolutionary consumption, I really like, just so you're on the same page with me, so you hear where I'm coming from, I love the idea of targeted consumption. I love the idea of rewarding the areas that are on the right side of things and depriving the areas that are not. But no matter where this money goes or where it comes from, it's very important to understand that recessions don't come about because we target this or target that. Recessions are simply amount of money coming in, amount of money leaving, amount of money set over here in savings that is pulled out of the economy, and the economy shrinks. It doesn't really matter where we spend or where we take away. Recessions are oftentimes a result of just all those leakages to the economy. And so what we're doing here is, in essence, flirting strongly with disaster, with a recession. So I just want to put that out there.
I agree.
Okay.
Absolutely agree. That's why we need to keep our eye on the GDP reports, the quarterly GDP reports. We don't want this to go into recession. So the difference with normal recessions and declining standards of living, and what I'm suggesting is we're saving this money. Maybe you're putting the money into a cash deposit, or you're just putting it into a savings account, but you're actually building up a surplus. Your standard of living is only going down because you are choosing to consume less, but you still have all the same stuff. Your standard isn't going down because you're not buying a new iPhone. You still have your old iPhone. You're just waiting to buy a new iPhone when there's one of two circumstances. I talked about the third quarter. We do want to start spending money, right? Because you're right, we're flirting with disaster. So at some point, you need to actually use some of that pent up desire to spend. If we can actually get the economy to decline. And there's another. You talked about recession. There's another possibility, and I'm not suggesting this in order to bail out Donald Trump if the country does go into a recession. But if people are doing this, if millions of people are doing this, and they have thousands of dollars saved up, do the math, millions times thousands, that's a lot of money. So the next time there's a bust, right? The economy tends to go in booms and busts. And Lee Camp just covered impending crash of the economy through the student loan bubble we're currently in. That's very likely to go into a bust, and that could set off a series of events that slide us into a recession. But if enough people have enough money saved up, and there's enough pent up desire for stuff that they have intentionally put off until some necessary time, either to keep us out of recession or, and this is plan B, if there is a bust of the economy, the American consumers, and Peterson isn't going to like this, these conservatives aren't going to like this, this is the time to actually go out and buy the new clothes and buy the new car and buy stuff to keep people employed and actually minimize what would normally be another great recession. This could actually be used. And that, again, this is a movement kind of thing, a revolutionary kind of activity that is coordinated, not by Victor Tiffany operating from some website or Facebook page, but just people thinking, this is the time to spend. We're going into a recession. We don't want a recession. We don't want people to suffer, lose their jobs and lose their homes. So this is the time to just go out and get that new car. This is the time to go out and get the new stuff and keep the economy from crashing into another great recession. So it is there is a sort of a governor to this, like a governor on an engine stops it from going too fast, and you can actually stop it from slowing down too much, as long as you pay attention to GDP and the news. We knew in 2007 that there was something underway, that people were starting to default on these crazy mortgages that had been put in place, and things were starting to happen. But there was also huge debt at the time, private debt, right? A lot of people were just already up to their ears in private debt. So they didn't have the ability to start spending and get this and prevent the Great Recession from taking place. What revolutionary consumption can do is build a kind of surplus of unused money sitting in savings accounts and cash deposits and the like that can be put into play to prevent the next bursting bubble from turning into another Great Recession.
Now, I will tell you this. There are automatic stabilizers built into the economy. All over the place, there are built-in stabilizers. People assume they're to help the little people, but they're really just to make sure that the economy doesn't bottom out by some market force or some, unknown factor. So, naturally, when people start getting laid off, the deficit rises because tax receipts go down and expenditures go up because more people are on welfare, more people are on unemployment, more people are on these different subsidies, be it food stamps, you name it. Those are all automatic stabilizers for the economy. And so, one of the things that jumps to mind, and I'll just play devil's advocate here with you momentarily, a lot of the Donald Trump talk, in my opinion, has been a cover to make Hillary somehow or another still look somewhat palatable. A lot of people still trying to prep Hillary for 2020 from what I'm even hearing. It's just disgusting.
She may be prepping as well.
It's disgusting, right? So the reality is that, hey, you didn't learn the first time. You're going to vote for me now? We didn't learn the other two times. But my point is that I see Trump largely as just another Republican, okay? And while he is a climate denier, remember who Richard Nixon was, okay? And Richard Nixon was forced by the will of the people to implement things like the EPA, et cetera. So
there was a Democratic Congress.
There was, but he could have vetoed those things. They didn't have a veto-proof Congress. He literally was able. He did what was told of the people, in my opinion. And all I'm trying to suggest here is maybe, and I don't know if I'm right or not. Is there any chance that a solid, unified, progressive push that was focused on those issues that we've all claimed to support throughout the Bernie campaign, through the Jill campaign, and have now largely been completely forgotten about and are no longer spoken about. In fact, people say, why are you even talking about this? We've got the Republicans right now, which many people aren't really paying attention to, but it's starting to get media attention. The Koch brothers and the GOP state houses around the country are little by little quietly preparing for a constitutional convention to rewrite the Constitution, institute a suicidal balanced budget amendment that would literally wreak the most awful terror on us all. But yet there are, think about this, you'll love this. This is the GOP and the Koch brothers pushing it. Yet there are still worthless people on the progressive side that believe we should balance the budget, that believe we should cut spending, that believe we should, and that tells me that we've got a real serious deficit in intelligence in the progressive community. A lot of people that are not terribly sharp, that say things, do things, but don't have any kind of intellect to back those things up, and it is destructive. So as we sit here and prep for these things, remember, there is a loyal opposition literally seeking to undermine our very existence. And that right now, this is true. There are Democrats that would sign on for a balanced budget amendment. And that
it's mostly a right-wing effort, and it is bizarre that this many people are so deeply entrenched in conventional thinking that they just can't grasp the extent to which this would destroy the economy. This would, I hate to use the term, but handcuff the government's capability of creating economic growth, of all kinds of things, shifting from fossil fuels to green, Amen. Sustainable energy. I mean, all kinds of things. You talked about the mechanisms in place to keep the economy on a fairly even keel. It would rip those out from under us.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not only that they want. It's not only it's a balanced budget amendment. I actually done some research on this. They have a mechanism in place. Part of the amendment is to change the voting in Congress for tax increases. Instead of a 51% vote for a tax increase, they want to make it 2/3. Right? They want to make tax increases absolutely impossible. But the whole idea is really, it's an attack on progress. It's an attack on demand side economics. It's an attack. It's not even an attack on modern monetary theory. I think it's a complete ignorance of monetary theory, modern or otherwise. It's stupid in the extreme.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, no, I'm well aware of that. And what really used to bother me more than it does now was this higher threshold for tax increases. But now I'm with you more because of the enlightenment I've gotten over the last year, particularly during the Stein campaign on modern monetary theory. That just the idea of balancing the budget, forcing a balanced budget. Except in emergencies, they do have clauses for things like that in the amendment. But it's just such stupid economics. It's like they don't have. It's like they think we're on the gold standard or something. It's just bizarre. Or that we're states in a higher sovereign. Right? Yeah. They just have no concept of economics. Broad.
Here's what's frightening, Victor, and this is what drives my ship. I know you've heard this before, and now that you're talking about Donald Trump, some of the heat's probably coming off of you. But for me, I don't focus a lot on Trump. And it's not because I don't think he's a bad man. It's because I'm scared shitless about our current crop of progressive revolutionaries who both think that we're on the gold standard, who also think that we should go back to the gold standard, who are economic illiterati, who are bought into more conspiracies than Alex Jones, and who are sitting there literally. I mean, the things that come out of our team's mouths are frightening. So when we go to 2018 or we go to 2020, and that next rising star of the progressive movement comes out, and they are economically illiterate too, because they're good people, they're really sweet, they play a mean game of chess, but they don't understand economics. Now all of a sudden, all those grand progressive plans, they still can't happen. They're saying the right things, so don't you bash Tulsi, don't you bash Bernie, but yet at the same time, they're not getting anything done. And that to me is my greatest fear, because I believe we are on the threshold of a crisis within our environment. We may already be at an event horizon. I don't know.
I think we are. We're transitioning, and we're definitely running out of time. That's why I make this argument for revolutionary consumption. We can't wait really until 2016 or 2020 if we even get a progressive into the executive branch of government at that point. It's happening. The oceans are acidifying. The coral reefs are dying. The bees are dying off. We are being confronted with just a large environmental collapse, and that's why we have to take action now. And Noam Chomsky just addressed this in a recent interview, saying how our prospects are dim, and doing something about it is really difficult. So the strategy, revolutionary consumption, is actually not difficult to understand. It's very easy. Stop buying stuff. Stop using energy. Turn the lights out. Turn the television off when you're not watching it. Just a long list of ways we can reduce our carbon footprint. That part is easy to understand. The hard part, and this is where Chomsky was spot on, the hard part is the fact that we've been programmed to spend. We're not programmed for personal austerity. We're programmed to buy, to shop till we drop. Some people shop as a form of escape, right? Some people read escape novels. Some people watch television. Some people go shopping just to escape from, the current events that are horrible going on around the world. Mm-hmm. So that's the hard part, is breaking through these habits. We're creatures of habit, and the idea of, well, I'm not going to buy something I want, I'm just going to stick this money in a savings account. goes against the grain. I mean, Americans used to be this way all the time, right? Before corporations found television and radio, and we can advertise and we can sell more stuff. And so it's not going to be easy in terms of changing our habits and changing our habits and getting control of our own desires for more stuff. And there's one more point about this. I talked about the 4 points of this strategy, but there's one more point, and that is to turn this into a movement. All right, so if you're watching this video, you'll have the opportunity to come to Real Progressive's Facebook page going on, and there's a little button underneath the video that says share. Share this video. Get this information out there. Because unless this turns into a movement, and it's going to be sort of like a flock of birds that all fly in synchronization, right? We all have to pay attention to the GDP reports. We just cut our consumption as much as we can and increase it again when there's two quarters of decline in a row, because we don't want to drive the economy into the ditch. And we just start functioning like a governor on the economy. But it's not going to happen if 10,000 people are doing this. It's barely going to put a noticeable ripple into the economy. If 100,000 people are doing it, it will produce a ripple, but it won't be enough to send the economy into a slow downward trend. It won't be until we have 5 to 10 million people consciously engaged in revolutionary consumption in order to preserve the climate and undermine Donald Trump. One reason I bring up Trump, you say you don't focus on Trump at all, but I think it is important to make sure he's not reelected, although we may threaten that in 2020 with a progressive or bust strategy again. But it is important to not let him make America great again, not let him succeed. I think it was Obama and Clinton both wished him well in office. I don't wish him well at all. I hope he's a failure. But I don't want to see, a horrible collapse come any more than I want to see a nuclear war unfold, or any war unfold in Syria or anywhere else. So the fifth element of this revolutionary consumption is to spread the word, just like we did with Burn Your Bust. Right? We managed to do this with extremely small budget. We did form a PAC, and we did raise some money, but we didn't really spend large amounts of money until we got to the DNC when we bought that very expensive billboard. We built a movement on a shoestring budget, and we can do it again using social media, using Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and all the rest, and just start spreading word, make up memes, undermine Trump, buy less stuff. And things like that. Just whatever kind of memes people could come up with. There were so many different Burn Your Bust memes. One of my favorite was a picture of a guy with like 10 guns pointed at his head, and it was Burn Your Bust, and no, I still won't vote for Hillary. So if people can put their creative energy into this idea, and basically just turn out the lights and just stop spending money as much as we're used to. Go on fewer vacations, go on closer vacations, go on fewer trips. Travel when you have to travel, but don't travel because you want to travel. Yeah, there's, again, thousands of ways. And ultimately, we are going to need to build a website in order to track that GDP, right? That's one thing we want to do, is keep a track on that. And the other thing is to have a reference people can go to for best practices on saving energy, on talking to your spouse about saving energy, because he or she may not want to stop spending. Again, we're creatures of habit. So we want more new stuff. It's just programmed into us.
Well, I want to say something real quickly to this. We had Fidel Kaboub from the Ben Zager Institute on the other night, and he showed some graphs about the very, very scant amount of disposable income the 99% have. The very, very small amount of people that actually truly have disposable income, it is infinitesimal. It's such a small amount. Most people, like for myself, I'm behind on my mortgage. I'm behind on my electric bill. I'm behind on, hell, behind on child support from a layoff that I've never quite caught up on. So, people are not living in such a way. I mean, yes, there is some fat on the hog, so to speak, but not much. The numbers bear this out. So when you're looking at this, my concern is that I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate the sensibilities. I just don't know that there's enough fat in the regular people of this country, short of literally self-imposed true austerity, draconian austerity. I'm just looking at when you look at the wealth income gap in America and the GDP distribution to the top 1% and the very, 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 very small amount that's at the bottom, the amount of money that we have to impact the economy is quite frankly, it's minuscule. It's very, very small. So I want to level set with you. How do you propose to offset that? Because literally the bottom 99 it's like most people are living less than paycheck to paycheck.
Right. Well, I already addressed that when I talked about the people who are already living paycheck to paycheck. And as far as, so there's two other groups out there, those who have a little disposable income and then the 1%. A lot of the 1% aren't going to change their habits. They're not going to stop using their yachts. They're conservatives anyway. They probably support Trump, and there's no reaching out to them any more than there is the redneck, pickup truck driver who, yeehaw, I'm going to burn up energy and help make America great again. So there's a certain percentage of the population that you're just not going to reach. But there are members of the 1% who are liberal, right? And there's no reason that they can't curb some of their consumption. If they just catch wind of this and go, I have a much greater responsibility in undermining Trump and preserving the climate than Steve Grumbine and Victor Tiffany do, because they don't have the kind of surplus money, available funds to buy stuff that I have. So the appeal is to two different groups. There's the top half of the 99% that do have disposable income, and then there's the small percentage of the 1% that actually have a lot of disposable income, and they're liberal or progressive enough to realize I have a great responsibility from my wealth to participate in this revolutionary consumption and help undermine Donald Trump on one hand and preserve the climate on the other hand. So, I don't know any of these people, but part of the idea of spreading this out to more and more people and get 5 to 10 million people who do have disposable income to set it aside and save it in savings accounts and cash deposits and the like. One thing I'm not advising people to do with that spare money is investing it into the stock market, because the report I heard from Lee Camp the other night about the student debt bubble suggests to me that as high as the stock market is right now, it's probably positioned to go into a crash. But that doesn't mean the economy has to go into a recession. That you can actually have a decline in the stock market without leading to a recession. So, that's the answer to the question. Obviously, I'm talking mostly to people with disposable income, but I'm also speaking to homeowners with disposable income who want to help preserve the climate and want to help undermine Donald Trump. It's like a 1-2 punch. A lot of people who do want to resist Trump. Another point about this I want to make. A lot of people are not going to work on May Day, right? Because they're going to be part of the general strike that's being organized by Movement for the 99%. And some people might do civil disobedience. They're already talking about organizing that for resistance to the nuclear arms buildup that's being proposed. It was something I doubt they would have been doing under Hillary Clinton, who was probably going to spend as much money on nuclear arms as Donald Trump. But the thing about revolutionary consumption is you don't have to have a spine. You don't have to have any courage. There's absolutely no risk personal to you for doing this, right? Because no one's going to no one's going to arrest you for saving money. Nobody's going to fire you from your job because you're not spending enough money. It's a very safe thing to do. Anybody can do it, right? It doesn't take a spine, and it doesn't take courage. You just stop spending your disposable income for now and keep your eye on the GDP. So it's something a lot more people can do. A wealthy multimillionaire who doesn't want to go to jail, who doesn't want to commit civil disobedience, doesn't want to see Donald Trump elected, can curb some of his or her spending that he or she might normally do.
Very good. All right, so Victor, you wanted to talk to me about what was next. What's next for you guys?
Well, there's a branch off of progressive or bust that are going to try to take on the 2018 midterm elections. So we support them. We're not actually organizing that because I want to stay married. And I have to stop putting in these 40, 50-hour work weeks on top of my job. But come 2019, our committee has already had a discussion and we've taken a vote, and we're going to do this again if there's a worthy progressive or two or three that we can get behind and do this kind of leverage again in 2020. So in 2019, once we know who's running, instead of a committee of 5 people deciding in essence who the next president's going to be, which isn't particularly democratic, we're going to poll all the people who took the Burn Your Bus pledge, who are still subscribed to our newsletter. We're going to poll them and let our movement decide what progressive we're going to get behind. We've already polled them to see if they want to do this again. Aside from the committee deciding we're going to do it again, we've polled the people who took the Burn Your Bus pledge. 50% of them want to do it again, and another 43% will do it if it's the right progressive. So we're letting them decide who's going to be the progressive we're going to get behind deploying leverage again in 2020. And if you're not part of our movement, citizensagainstplutocracy.org, you can go there, you can sign up. We used to say take the pledge, but at this point it's just signing up as part of the revolution or bust movement. And you too can be a part of the decision-making body that will decide who the next president of the United States will be. Because we're very dead serious about this. We're not going to support another neoliberal. This is a war, this leverage strategy, just like really so is the Green Party. But let's face it, when you're only getting 1% in the polls, and Kenneth Mejia, how do you pronounce his name? Mejia got 4.4% in that special election that's now going to be a runoff. 4.4%. Greens can't win elections to Congress. I wish they could, but let's face reality. The best bet at this point, at this stage in history, for progressives to get into Congress and the White House is, unfortunately, through the corrupt counter-revolutionary party, the Democrats. So we're going to do it again. And if the Democrats go with another Hillary Clinton or any other neoconservative like, what's his name in New Jersey?
No, I don't know.
The guy who voted against
Cory Hooker.
Cory Booker, yeah, Cory Hooker. Oh. If they go with another neoliberal like Clinton or Booker, forget it. You know, we'll vote Green, and we know the Green Party candidate isn't going to win the election, but we also know, because we're committed revolutionaries, that the neoliberal Democrat is also going to lose, and that's the message we got to get through to a lot more people, liberals, moderates, everybody in the Democratic Party. You keep nominating neoliberals, you're going to keep losing elections. That's our commitment. That is our revolutionary pledge to the Democratic Party and members of the Democratic Party.
I want to just ask you to keep an open mind about what I'm saying here. Take this back, think about it when nobody's around. My biggest concern, and I say this and I'll say it again, our movement is economically illiterate. Like, I mean, bona fide, maybe less literate than the Republicans. That's how bad progressives have become with the myths they believe in. They get trapped in some fantasy idea and roll over here, and they lose sight of the prize. What I am deathly concerned about, and I'm telling you this, please keep this in mind, because I want to support, I want to bring everybody together too. I want to be a part of that push. But I've made a economically literate or bust pledge that anybody that goes out there and talks about raising taxes to pay for stuff, I am going to go after with both barrels. Anybody that speaks incorrectly, anybody who says the wrong things, who pushes the lie, because Social Security is at risk. They're trying to privatize it now. Every single one of the programs that we want, it's not just, hey, I want these things. People are literally dying today. Not in 5 years when Trump's out of office, but today, right now. And so my concern is that people that don't know economics blow past it. They're very tribal. They don't listen. They've got these myths that they believe in. And as we go to bring forth these new people and they say, we're anti-neoliberal, but yet they support people that push neoliberal economic policies because they don't really know what the term neoliberal is even. That's what I'm concerned about, Victor. So I think that as much as we want to push people to make smart decisions with consumption, I think we also need to make sure that people are not dullards and that they embrace truth, or we are going to have nothing to brag about. And then when the next progressive does get elected and they push forward the most putrid economic policy because they didn't learn now, who are we going to blame? Are we going to blame the Republicans? Are we going to blame Hillary Clinton? No, it's our own stupidity that we'll have to blame. And I'm very concerned. That scares the shit out of me. I'll just be honest.
Well, it should. Let me just address this from my perspective. A year ago, I've studied political economics. A year ago, I thought I was pretty literate on economics, and then I met you. So you're the apostate here. You're the one who really is leading the charge on this, and I know you're taking a lot of heat for this from various quarters. And you just, you have to ignore that, just like we did with Bernie or Bust. Oh my God, you're going to get Donald Trump elected. Well, no, you are going to get Donald Trump elected unless you nominate Sanders. You just got to be firm and tough, and keep doing what you're doing. Now we're on the verge of starting a YouTube channel, Revolt Against Plutocracy YouTube channel. And one of our first guests will be Steve Grumbind to talk about modern monetary theory. Because you're right. There is a big, I mean, it was probably true in the 1930s about Keynesian economics. You're probably in a different stage with a different theory, just like the Keynesians were. The early Keynesians probably had the same sort of frustration you're experiencing now. Oh my God, people don't understand demand side economics. They think we need tax increases or whatever. They're worried about the debt. That's not a problem right now. So they probably had the same sort of backlash and criticisms and many conservatives are still critical of Keynesian economics. So you just have to be strong and don't have a thin skin and just keep plugging away. I think you're doing a great job. You educated me, and I still have things I need to learn about modern monetary theory. And when you're my guest on Revolt Against Plutocracy television channel, I'm going to be asking you the tough questions about debt and deficits and the kinds of charges that I know people caught up in conventional thinking are going to ask whatever progressive candidate who is arguing, look, the debt's not a problem, don't worry about it right now. They're going to hit them with that. So I'm going to hit you with those kind of questions so that all of us can be enlightened over what is basically the way the world works. They talk about modern monetary theory, but it's actually modern monetary practice. It's
modern monetary reality. We call it macroeconomic reality.
It is. Once you think about it, once you understand this. I mean, I had a hard time wrapping my head around it when I first started taking this on because, I was in conventional thinking. We can't let the debt explode. We're passing along debt to our next generation. I was trapped in conventional thinking.
Sure.
And you helped me get out of that. And if you help me get out of that, I'm sure you can help millions of other people get out of that. And I think that's your mission. Steve Grumbine, the apostate.
I like it. On that note, man, thank you so much. Again, you've been a hero of mine since I first met you, and I really am glad that I'm friends with you, Victor, and I appreciate every sacrifice you've made. Thank you so much. Have a great one, sir, and I look forward to talking to you on your channel as well.
Great. Thanks for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, buddy. Have a good one.
You too.
All right. And